Hello everyone, Buen Camino to my Camino people. I'm back with another book review, and it is a book that I had on my TBR for Victober, and it's now Black Friday, and I'm just coming around to reviewing it. It is Shirley by Charlotte Bronte, not one of the other Bronte sisters, as I sometimes say. And this was the Victober read-along that was hosted by a group of booktubers for Victober. I totally meant to stick with the reading plan or something close to the reading plan that was about a chapter a day throughout all of October, and that didn't happen. There's 38 chapters in here. There's 31 days in October. As time was going on, I was kind of falling more and more behind. I caught up like once, like midway through the second week, and then after that, I just fell more and more hopelessly behind on this book. So I didn't finish the book until November 15th, and even that was like 11 days ago. So I've been doing a lot of holiday stuff, getting ready for Christmas. Yesterday was Thanksgiving. I had a nice Thanksgiving with most of my family who was able to travel. I know for a lot of people, this wasn't the best Thanksgiving ever. 2020 continues to wreak its horror upon us all. My Victober was pretty much a failure, as you might conclude from my lack of a wrap up. Not only did it take me until November 15th to finish Shirley, but I got nowhere in my third or fourth attempt to read Barney the Vampire, so that's still out there somewhere. I did make a little bit of progress in the letters of Charlotte Bronte that I was going to read alongside of this, but my plan to kind of read some letters and read a chapter of Shirley and go back and forth and make progress in both, that didn't happen either. And then everything just kind of fell apart from there. I didn't really make any progress in my H.P. Lovecraft, which was going to be my non-Victober Halloween read. That didn't happen either. Along the way, if you saw my last review, you can see that I did finish a book. I think it was posted on November 1st or abouts, the philosophical inquiry into the origins of our ideas on the beautiful and the sublime, or the sublime and the beautiful by Edmund Burke. I posted that as part of Nonfiction November. I'm not going to really make a Nonfiction November TBR or commit to anything on there because I'm still kind of dedicated to getting through the books that I wanted to get through in Victober. So to talk about Shirley, I really enjoyed parts of this book in the middle of the month, and especially when I had first caught up and I was getting towards the end of volume 1, which, if you do not know, this book is published originally in 3 volumes, which was a very popular format at the time, and I think that it is what killed this book for me, because this book is too long. It's interesting because from what I've read about Charlotte Bronte's life, she originally tried to have The Professor published before any of her other books, I believe. And she could not get it published initially, I believe, because it didn't follow this like three volume format that was very popular at the time. I think that Jane Eyre follows along with the 3 volume format, but for Jane Eyre, it's okay. It's okay that Jane Eyre takes a long time to get into the main story with Jane and Rochester and their conflicted relationship, because Jane Eyre is a freaking masterpiece. Jane Eyre is one of the greatest things I've ever read. Jane Eyre was one of the most captivating things I've ever read. The characters in Jane Eyre were so compelling. Jane's voice itself is so compelling. Her story as a character, the world that you get swept up in, is just amazingly compelling. It drives you forward with this like incredible emotional narrative force. Shirley does not. At parts, Shirley was like a really good book, but it's just too long. And even when I was 100 or 200 pages into it, I was like, this is just too long. Like, it's not getting anywhere. It's just not. It's like willfully not getting anywhere. There's a lot of scenes of just people having conversations, and some of that was really compelling, actually, and some of it you just really enjoyed being there with the characters. But you were just there with the characters forever. I mean, it's just endless parlor scenes of people talking and trolloping through the woods and just talking about things. and it was just too long. I think that this book could have been really good, maybe even a masterpiece, but you gotta dig like 100, 150, 200 pages out of this thing. Because I mean, my edition is like 450, and I mean, no, it's like, oh, no, it's like 550. It's like 550. Maybe if you scaled that back to like 400, you might have like a really fast-paced kind of story. But as it is, it just doesn't get anywhere anytime soon. I had read the introduction and I had read some things because a lot of my favorite booktubers were going to be reading or reviewing this book in the month of October for the Victober read along. And some people said that it was like their favorite book or great things about it. And I had heard about an attack on the mill as being one of the big scenes in this book. And so I was like, this sounds great. Like, these workers are going to attack this mill that's owned by the rich and caring but kind of aloof. He really does care, but he comes off as not caring about his workers. Guy, Robert Moore. And I was like, okay, this is great. Here comes like the big confrontation. You know, you've got the workers, they're going to try and smash the machines and everything. And he's going to try and defend his property. There's going to be this battle, and everything is hinting at it as the text goes. And I've heard about it as like a key scene in the book. And so I'm just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for hundreds upon hundreds of pages. And finally, after about 300 and some odd pages, finally the attack on the mill comes. And by then, it was really good, but like it was like you just waited like too long for it. The first volume of the book essentially just sets up only like half of the characters that are even important to the book. I think the first volume was about 160 some odd pages in this, and Shirley does not come in or even be mentioned until the last chapter of the dozen chapters in that volume. So the first 160 pages of this book are completely free of a mention of Shirley, who is apparently the main character. If you read the first 160 pages, you're going to think that the main character is Caroline, and the book totally is revolving around Caroline's point of view, her perspective on things, her view of Robert Moore, who is her cousin, the mill owner, who she is in love with, and what their relationship is, and his relationship to the rest of his family, his relationship to the community, and what her views on the type of person that he is. So you could also say Robert Moore is maybe a potential main character in this. And both of them actually just end up being characters kind of caught in the orbit of Shirley, who is this incredibly strong persona who does not enter until, 35% of the way through her own book. She comes, and then even at that point, when she enters into the narrative, she's kind of tangential because she's brought in as a friend to Caroline and also a love interest for Robert Moore. You get a love triangle. I don't know how spoiler I want to get on this, but like the love triangle is portrayed one way in the second act of the book and portrayed in a totally different way in the third act of the book. And if I reread the book, I actually think that it would be worse, because I think a lot of the tension that's in the middle of the book, basically it gets resolved in the third act of the book in a way, without spoilers, that's just like, oh yeah, that tension was just like me faking out the reader. It wasn't actually there. Even though everything was implied that it was, it wasn't. And that was just like a misreading of the characters and of the reader. And so that really felt, so now the book is kind of less interesting, I would feel, on a second read. Will I ever read this book again? I don't know. The third act, once again, it really slowed down after the second act was kind of really good. The middle of the book I enjoyed more than anything else. The friendship between Shirley and Caroline was really well portrayed. I thought that there was a good love triangle thing going on. There was lots of interesting social commentary about the Luddite movement, about different various people in the community and how they were reacting to the workers' demands and complaints, and how that was going to work out. A lot of interesting social commentary came in the middle of the book. Then the third act of the book is slowed way down again, and I didn't know why. People who are been main characters since page one just disappear and you just vaguely hear about it. Like, people are sick and bedridden. Multiple people get sick and bedridden and they're going to die and these things. And that storyline kind of repeats itself several times. Like, everyone gets sick and is going to die at some point, whether they're shot or come up with a fever or just random things. It slows the plot down so much. And while the characters were enjoyable, they're not as dramatic as like the kind of gothic melodrama of the Jane Eyre kind of gets into. And without that, with it being more of a psychologically realistic book, maybe, the slowing down of the plot and then the introduction of kind of new plot lines in volume 3, it was just like, oh, well, this was never mentioned before, but now, bum, bum, bum. And so, going to slight spoiler details, the last third of the book, never mentioned in like before then, but becomes the huge plot point of the third part of the story, involves a let's say a student teacher like romance. And what's interesting about it is that it sucks all the oxygen out of all of the other kind of relationships, because they all kind of fall to the side to the intensity of this unrequited love of a student for her teacher. And that becomes kind of the main point of the book. After you've had this love triangle, after you've had the conflict between workers and Robert Moore, after you've had everything family dynamics, this unrequited love for someone's teacher becomes like the main point of the last third of the book, even though it doesn't tie that well into everything else that's going on. And here's my comment on that. Yeah, it's convincing. I totally got it. Okay. But this also happened in Charlotte Bronte's real life. Like, she was in love with her professor. And then in this book, like, the main character is in love with her professor. And there's another book that she wrote called The Professor, where there's also like a student professor romance. And then her other book, I can't even pronounce it, Bronte, is a reworking of The Professor. So in her real life and in 3 out of 4 of her books, it's all about like a student teacher romance. Maybe that's like overkill. Like, you're kind of maybe beating the theme a little bit hard there. Charlotte, maybe you should just got over the guy who was married anyway. So, I really don't have that much else to say with Shirley. I don't want this to become like a long review. I think I've said enough about it. Would I recommend it? Well, if you have not read Charlotte Bronte, and you're thinking like, should I read something? Well, read Jane Eyre. Definitely read Jane Eyre. Don't read this. Don't read this before Jane Eyre. Read Jane Eyre. And then if you're dying for something that's like Jane Eyre, probably still go find something that's like Jane Eyre and don't get this. If you're terribly interested in the Brontes because they have a really compelling story as a tragically dying off literary brood, then maybe, I don't know. I haven't read the other Bronte books, and this one, it's a distant second to Jane Eyre. I would say that her letters might even be more interesting. I am going to finish her letters, and my plan is to review them before December comes around. So this is, it is a place to read another book by Charlotte Bronte, but this, I can't picture this being anybody's favorite novel. I don't know what I'm missing. I don't know how you read this and you're like, yes, I would rather read this than Jane Eyre. So we'll always have Jane Eyre. Okay, Charlotte, we'll always have Jane Eyre. I am glad that I read this book. If you're interested in the time period, which it's set during the Napoleonic Wars, but it's set, in a industrializing town with a mill. And if you're interested in that time period, okay, maybe. But other than that, it's a long Victorian historical novel that doesn't compare to the other book that I've read written by the same author. The characters are great characters. They're really compelling. The best thing I can say about this book is the characters. The worst thing that I can say about this plot is the slow narrative pacing and lack of getting to the story. One final thing I will mention, I really liked one character in here, Malone, the Irish curate who is this priest, but he's basically like this enforcer guy whenever they need some brute muscle. They're like really kind of racist, and they're just like, get that Irish guy Malone. He's got a shillelagh. But I kind of liked like this, like I'm just picturing him like a brick house with this shillelagh, and here comes Malone, and I really liked his character, and his character like disappears, and then in the end when they're just wrapping up what happened to characters, they're like, oh, he did something like really horrible, and then he disappeared, and we're not going to talk about him. And I was like, oh man, the one side character that I really liked, his side story is just some paragraphs in the appendix that say we're not going to say what happened to him. That was a little bit disappointing. So more love for my boy Malone. I hope whatever trouble he got into, he brought his shillelagh with him. So peace out, Malone. We're saying goodnight to Shirley. We've got one book from Victober done, and it's late November. I'll be back with more book reviews later on, guys. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. We're up to 8 subscribers now, so we're tied with my first channel. Let's get it to number 1. Let's have the second channel beat the first channel. Thanks for listening, guys. I'll be back with more reviews later this week.